So welcome to this church chat. In the last week we had very, very sad and shocking news of the sudden passing of the Archbishop of Glasgow, Philip Tartaglia. In normal times it's very difficult, but in these days of restrictions and lockdowns, many people can't express their condolences, can't gather together in the churches to pray for his repose of his soul and to reflect on his memory. So today we've brought together some people from across the Archdiocese of Glasgow who knew Archbishop Tartaglia personally to work with, and I'm delighted to welcome today the Bishop of Paisley, Bishop John Keenan, the International Alliance of Catholic Night President Charlie McCluskey, and Mairi-Claire McGeady, who works for the Roman Catholic Archdiocese Youth Office, Archag Youth. So welcome all here today. So just to start, obviously the news dust is beginning to settle in some ways in this shocking news. What was the first sort of initial reaction, Bishop John, when you heard that sad story?
I just could not believe it. I couldn't really compute or get my head around it, and reminiscing about him. He had been Bishop of Paisley, and they were very happy 7 years as Bishop of Paisley. He himself was really happy as Bishop of Paisley. He often would say to me that Paisley is a lovely diocese, a lot of fondness in his heart. He was very much loved by the priests and the people of Paisley, so those other priests obviously were just reminiscing about it. And then after the reminiscence, just a sadness kind of came across us, and that sadness just really remained. I think we were aware that, we'd lost a real heavyweight, a man of enormous gravitas in the Catholic Church in Scotland, of great authority, omnipresent, and it was just really difficult to look at that place and see that he's not there.
Yeah, and Charlie, I mean, as the news filtered through, it started in social media, it filtered out because everyone's in their homes at the minute. What was your sense of the reaction amongst Catholics across Scotland, the Archdiocese and beyond?
For me personally, and I suppose I had an advantage of having known him quite well, it was a total feeling of loss. I mean, it was shock to start with, for him not, to be there one day and suddenly he's not there. And the outpouring, certainly among Catholic friends and family that I have, was unbelievable. There was this feeling of total. I mean, one of the knights actually said to me he felt as if he'd lost a member of his own family. And I think that's what Archbishop Philip, during his time as Archbishop of Glasgow, I think that's what he brought to the role of a father within the Archdiocese. So there was that massive feeling of loss, John. Certainly, as I say, on a personal basis, but everyone I've spoken to since last week, it's that loss is very palpable, and people are really feeling it.
Yeah, I don't know if you're the same, Mairi-Claire, in this sudden sense of loss. You worked with Archbishop Philip in Clyde Street. What was that like, and what was your sort of feeling on hearing that tragic news?
Yeah, just similar. I couldn't believe the news when I first heard it. We were just about to go live with a virtual pilgrimage for the Feast of St. Mungo, and news hit, and just a real heartbreak and devastation. And I totally resonate with what Charlie was saying. I think something that really struck me about the Archbishop was his fatherliness, and it was delightful to work with. I guess at the beginning I would be so nervous around him, is it his grace or your grace, or what if I call him father? But over time, as I got to know him, I realised his deep fatherliness and kindness, and he took a real keen interest in our work. He had a real desire to really engage with his young people, and to bring them into the church. And so, yeah, it was beautiful to work with. He was exceptionally fatherly, and it was encouraging in our role in the youth office to have him so passionate about the youth of the church, the youth of Glasgow, or as he always referred to them as dear young friends. And so a great sense of loss amongst the young people that I've encountered him at different events. Just seeing them share the same sentiment, that when they spoke with him, they really experienced his care and his love and his attentiveness. And so, yeah, it's a really great loss. It's a great loss for everyone.
Yeah, I think people are sending us messages now and different anecdotes and stories, just some of the kind things that he did behind the scenes, that not everyone sees, and especially the way he dealt with young people was quite extraordinary. Bishop John, you've got a very unique perspective on Archbishop Philip, given that he was once your bishop, then you were a successor, and then you were brother bishops in the conference. What was it like, his presence in the conference? Obviously, he was ahead of it for many a year.
It was the conference I got to know him quite well, because it was a generation ahead of me, John Patrick. So when I went to seminary, he was just really coming out of seminary back into parish, and when I was coming into parish as a young priest, not terribly long after that, he went back to be rector in Rome, and then subsequently on to Paisley, and he came back to Glasgow for 14, 15 months. I was there before I came to Paisley, so we kind of missed each other in the passing, but it's in the conference I got to know him really well. When I arrived, he was the president of the conference. He was the focal point of our discussion. That he was a reference point. I found that he welcomed me into the conference immediately. Welcomed me as a brother into the conference immediately. Welcomed me as an equal, as he welcomed all of us, and he's treated all of us that way. He had a good judgment. That his sense of things was his judgment of things was good. His opinion always had weight because he was a man of great intellect. He was a really good theologian and a man of great character. So we always listened to what he said around the conference table and gave it due weight. But at the same time, he was always keen to say, look, every bishop has his own judgment, and every bishop has to do what he thinks is right, and there's not a party line, that if you feel you've got to go one way, that's your prerogative and responsibility. So I think it created an atmosphere where everyone certainly felt they were able to say what they felt and how they saw things. But then we would go away 8 times a year. We'd be away with each other. Sometimes it would be a day conference. Sometimes it would be a 2 days with an overnight. Sometimes with 3 days with 3 overnights. Sometimes it would be Salamanca with a week together, as well as working together. We socialised together. We travelled together. At the end of our meetings, we sat down to a meal together. After the meal, we sat down and socialised with each other over a drink. And he was really terrific company when he felt that he was in his comfort zone, let's say, because he was quite a shy man. But when he felt he could relax, he really did relax, and it could be very funny, very witty at times, a little bit irreverent, and just very, very funny. And he would have us laughing. So I think at the end of all of that, we all really became brothers, I would say, the 8 of his bishops and our team. We relied on each other. We got support from each other. And I think, as well as him being a great support to us, I think he took support from his other bishops as well.
Charlie, Bishop Keenan mentioned, of course, that his great humour and his wit. What has your experience been of that, as counting as one of the Archbishop's friends?
He had that wit. Bishop Keenan said there just now, Archbishop Tartaglia, he was a shy man when you met him at first. I first met him when he was Bishop of Paisley, at our Supreme Council weekends, and really that was the only engagement I had with him at that time. And at first I was saying, well, he's pretty difficult to speak to. But then as I got to know him, and of course when he moved to Glasgow and we became closer and we worked together, especially with the nights, and he loved the nights. He had a great, that example that Bishop John has just said there about letting his hair down. You know, he was so comfortable with the nights on evenings. And, you know, I mean, as international president, one I remember, you know, on the International Alliance Conference was coming to Glasgow in 2019. So in 2000, just at the beginning of 2019, I was starting to set the dates and the arrangements. And I went to see him. We sat down in his office and we were chatting about it. And he said to me, he said, so what he always wanted to know everything, every detail. He was a great man for asking every detail. And I was going through it. And I said, and it ends with the plenary session ends with a mass, which we'd hope would be in the cathedral. And we would have dinner afterwards, and it's a formal dinner. And he said, right, fine, Charlie, that's great. He says, what is the dates, what we're looking at? And I said, it's going to be October, Your Grace, this year, 2019. And he said, it's going to finish on a Wednesday. I said, yeah. And he said, you know that's Champions League night. I said, yeah, Your Grace, but, you know, we're not always in the Champions League, or we're not always playing on a Wednesday. So, well, let's just pray it's not a Champions League night. The flip to that was, it wasn't. It was actually an international break weekend, and we had the event at Celtic Park, which he was in his element in, and to be in Celtic Park at a Catholic event, Archbishop of Glasgow, guest of honour. And he said to me, but Celtic had actually been knocked out of the Champions League before that event. And he turned around that night and he said to me, he says, Charlie, he says, remember that day in January when you met with me? He said, we prayed. He said, maybe we prayed just a wee bit too hard.
And Mairi-Claire, I mean, you spoke about his wit and you spoke about a shy man. How did he engage with the youth in the Archdiocese?
Yeah, firstly, just on that, it made me laugh. I really think in another world, he would have been a football manager from his kind of overview of the recent play of his team, and yeah, he loved his football. Engaged with the young people so beautifully, and just a couple of days ago, I was reminded back to being 19 and seeing this article in the SCO, and it was the headline that caught me, and I looked it up, and it said, Archbishop-elect Tartaglia's desire for young people to come back to the church. And it was beautiful just yesterday to read his words from, I think it was 2012, and how he said that, you know, every bishop is a special ministry to young people, and that he really desired to seek that opportunity to engage with them, and that in his experience they really appreciated personal contact, and how he hoped to share his faith, but also his humanity. And I think that is really what he did. And that is how he engaged with his young people. He found various ways to engage with them. And I mean, almost monthly through Archive Youth events, he would celebrate Mass for us and lead us in Lectio Divina and in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. But, you know, he wouldn't just arrive right before something was due to happen and lead us in Lectio and leave. But he would come usually at the start of the event and walk in as I'm explaining an icebreaker and kind of give me that look that I learned was, are you joking? As I was kind of delivering what I was hoping the group would do. But he would put down his briefcase and he would get involved because he desired to really encounter his young people face to face. And so, yeah, that is really what he did. Afterwards, he would somewhat humbly, I'm sure with his Italian taste buds, pick up some Domino's or Pizza Hut pizza and mingle with his young people and talk to them about life or football or faith or whatever. And so engage with them personally and faithfully and simply, always pointing back to the Lord, you know, always reminding them to go to Mass and confession and to say their prayers. So he really, what he desired, the heart he had for his young people, he really did in his time. And it was beautiful. And as we said, he had such a great sense of humour. And so it was just enjoyable company to be around. And I think our young people really appreciated that as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of young people, I think one of the things which we saw in our work with him is just how dedicated he actually was. You know, I'm thinking back to the prayer breakfast in Castlemilk, which started at the ungodly hour of 7 a.m. But no, he was there.
They were crazy mornings. It was like a 5 a.m. start to make it over to Castlemilk, but he was there and he was excited, you know. I was like drinking any coffee that I could see near me to kind of get going. But he was so excited to be with his young people, and all these pupils had been there since the early hours cooking, and yeah, he really enjoyed it, and you really saw him in his element. You know, he really came alive when speaking with his dear young friends. It was beautiful.
What do you think, Bishop John? Obviously, I mean, he sadly passed away on the Feast of St Mungo. I mean, to me, that is absolutely providential. You know, he passed away on the feast of its predecessor in the Archdiocese of Glasgow. So, in that sense, what legacy does Archbishop leave the Archdiocese?
Well, I mean, I think first of all that you raise a really profound point, John Patrick, that you just cannot see that as coincidental. You can only see it as a consolation, of a sign of consolation. I mean, look, from our point of view, he was taken away too young, too suddenly, still in the prime of his life, still giving to the church and to the country as much as ever. So, you know, he was taken away from us too young, but our time isn't God's time. And that he was taken away on the morning of the Feast of St Mungo, the patron saint of the Archdiocese of Glasgow, the first bishop of the Archdiocese of Glasgow. Someone put on Facebook, the patron of Glasgow came to take the Archbishop of Glasgow home. And for me, that's been such a consolation, is that the good Lord has taken home a good and faithful servant. I think his legacy, Philip led the church through some of its darkest chapters and some of its most difficult chapters as a bishop. And we think of how he had to be there month after month with all of the issues around about safeguarding. And, you know, at one point he said to us, I've not been at a bishop's conference meeting where we've not had to have this on the agenda. And as we solved one problem, another one was then ahead of us. Add into that, he was there as an anchor for people when in an unprecedented way we had the resignation of Pope Benedict, and he was still there as a reference point for the people when that was something that was unsettling. He also had to be there at the helm when Cardinal O'Brien resigned, and so in many ways I think his legacy was that he was there. He, with generosity of spirit, he didn't abandon us. He stayed faithful to the end, in place, guiding the church through its darkest times. And one of the scriptures today talks about Christ, and Christ was an anchor, sure and firm. I think the people found in those times in him an anchor, sure and firm. Look, please God, after the pandemic, that brighter chapters will be in to come for the church. Please God, but I think we'll always remember that when we were walking through the darkness, we had a shepherd to go ahead of us and to lead us through.
There's processes involved in the sudden death of a bishop in a diocese. Bishop John, maybe you're best placed to answer this one. I mean, what happens when that news filters through? Obviously there's the shock and there's the grief and the mourning, but there is administration issues and things. What happens in that situation? Well,
when a bishop retires and then another bishop takes over, there's a kind of an orderly transition, is the kind of the phrase in vogue. So when Archbishop Mario had reached 75, he was able to stay on until Archbishop Tartaglia was appointed, and there's a kind of a serenity about that. There's something which is kind of normal about it. One retires and one comes in, but when a bishop dies in post, everything is is quite unsettled. At that point, the canon law comes in to guide us and to re-establish some kind of process and some kind of order. What it says is that insofar as all of the office holders of the diocese, the vicar general, the treasurer, the vicars episcopals, as far as they have their posts, following the sharing in the authority of the bishop, they demit their post. And so the vicar general, the treasurer, the vicars episcopal, one remains in place really to keep the process going, who's the chancellor, and his responsibility then is to call a meeting of the College of Consultors, who appoint an administrator of the diocese to look after the affairs of the diocese. In fact, most of the priests who were looking after remits will continue to look after them, but they'll just not have the titles. They're asked to not to innovate, but just really to keep the engine running, really kind of the ship steady as she goes. And so the College of Consultors have met, and I think everyone is very much consoled that Monsignor Hugh Bradley has been appointed as the administrator. He's a really safe pair of hands. He has tremendous experience both from working in the Vatican and as the General Secretary of the Bishops' Conference and as the Vicar General of the Archdiocese of Glasgow. So he's, I think we're all comforted that he is there. He knew Archbishop Philip very well. He understood Archbishop Philip's mind. He knows how to take things forward. So he'll look after the diocese now for the next year or maybe a couple of years.
Of course, all thoughts now are turning to His Grace's Requiem Mass. Charlie, one of the things which has struck everyone during this pandemic is that many people who are bereaved can't come together, and it's important to remember that Archbishop Philip was first and foremost a member of the Tartaglia family, a big family. They'll be mourning the loss of their brother and uncle and cousin and friend, and I think we forget in all this is we feel that we're members of the church and we're all one big family, but he has his own private family who also can't come together. How does it feel for yourself? What's your sense of the faithful not having that access to being able to come together in such numbers that would have happened normally if it wasn't for the pandemic?
I think, I'm sure the cathedral would have been packed to the rafters. I know it would have been. There would have been people outside. The Knights of St. Columba, I don't know if you are aware that Archbishop Philip became the national ecclesiastical advisor of the Knights only in October, and he was so looking forward to that job. And already he had put some great input into what we were doing, and in particular devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, which of course was so much part of his being, and I know he was planning to do so much on that this year ahead. For us, our legacy will be to take that devotion to the Blessed Sacrament and adoration of the Blessed Sacrament forward in his name. But there's a sense of not being able to be there in person. Thank the Lord, and I know under this pandemic, but we're given the opportunity through mediums like this to at least be there and to see and to take part in his Requiem. And I think that's important, and especially given that I'm sure the church, and I've noticed a lot of the notices coming out, I think it's right that, not for people to gather anywhere near the cathedral or be outside it or anything else. I don't think that would be helpful, and certainly something that Archbishop Philip would not want. But the opportunity we have is to, yourselves taking it forward and to be online on tomorrow evening and Wednesday night and Thursday at his Requiem. So for me personally, I will participate in that Mass fully and in his Requiem service. So that will give us a sense of comfort. I would hope maybe Bishop John would be able to, or Monsignor Hugh, or maybe do afterwards, that once we do come out of this, we will have that opportunity to have a memorial Mass where the whole of the Scottish Catholic community, but maybe in particular Glasgow and maybe the Knights of St. Columba, given such a his sort of love for our organisation and our love and support for him. Praise
God that may be the case after the pandemic. Marie-Claire, what will you will be your enduring memories of the Archbishop?
Oh gosh, so many fond memories. As you said, laughing. Also memories of him just being really encouraging and inspiring. But I think probably it comes back to that fatherliness, that shepherd's heart. That's, I think, what will endure, just seeing his great love for his sheep, especially as young people. And I saw a friend had shared her experience of encountering the Archbishop, and when I read it, it totally resonated with my heart. She said that she was at this meeting in this church hall and she was representing a diocese that she wasn't from. And every time she spoke, the Archbishop kind of looked at her, a little bit funny. She was wondering what he was thinking. And during the break, he came over to her and said, like, sorry, are you not one of mine? Are you not one of mine? And she was like, yeah, actually, and kind of explained. But she said, a good shepherd knows his sheep, and he knew that I was his. And I think that'll be the enduring memory is of our shepherd who really knew his sheep, who really cared for them, who really loved them, and most especially as young people.
That's beautiful words, and of course, just to remind everyone who's watching, we will be live streaming His Grace's funeral mass and body being received into the church on Wednesday at 6:30. It'll be on the Archdiocese Facebook and the Sancta Facebook and YouTube channels. For those who don't use Facebook or YouTube, there's options there. His funeral mass will be the next day at 12, and that is also will be live streamed. So please participate as much as you can on that feed. Share the news, people who can't see it. Help older people who maybe want to see it and can't access the links, so they can join in that as well. It's a sad scenario, Bishop John, that we're going to have only 20 there. Even yourself perhaps can't make it because of the restrictions.
It would have been a almost like a state funeral. There would have been the cathedral been in full. There would have been national, international figures from the state and from the church present, and the sanctuary would have been filled with priests. But this funeral, obviously because of the COVID pandemic, is reduced to 20. And Philip himself, no one would be happy with that than Philip. He was a shy man. When he had an opportunity, he liked to live his life quietly with just a few friends, with family, with priests, with teachers, people, that he would be quite happy to be going to the Lord quietly. But we do feel for his family, for his brothers and sisters, for his nieces and nephews, they were a close family, the Tartaglias, and they loved him. And Philip was a big figure in the church and a real father figure in the church. He was also a big figure and a father figure in the Tartaglia family. And they have to look on as the church buries an archbishop, as the country mourns the loss of a big figure. But for them, he was their brother. He was their uncle. He was their cousin. And I think our prayers and our sympathies and our hearts are very much with Philip's family, the Tartaglia family, as they bury a loved one, and we keep them very much in our prayers.
Well, thanks very much, all three of you, for coming here during this very busy time to reflect. I'm sure it will help many people who knew Archbishop Philip and maybe stuck in their homes just now and can't share those stories. And by all means, if you've got any stories or anecdotes you want to share, just pop them in the comments below the video, and we can all share and reflect and pray for the repose of his soul. So we look forward to seeing you all on the live streams, and hopefully everything will go well and we can pray as a Catholic Church digitally for the repose of the Archbishop Philip's soul. So thanks once again for joining in.